the last second. I do see it's 6 p.m. So I'll get us started in the interest of everyone's time. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Carl Granrath. I'm the hearing examiner for tonight's two public hearings. So, the purpose of tonight's hearings is to gather testimony and evidence for the matters that are pending. And after tonight's hearing, what I will do is prepare a report for my recommendation that I submit to the staff that goes to your county commissioners, who ultimately have the authority to make the decision for these applications. So, just a little procedure before we get started, and I see we've got two tonight, so we're going to do Diagonal Estates first. But just a little bit for procedure, what's going to happen is the staff is going to present the application with PowerPoint presentation. I'll ask them some questions, most likely, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to speak. And then after that, we'll open it up for public comment. I will give precedence to the people who came here in person and signed up to speak. And then there may be some people on Zoom. And so if you're listening on Zoom, just go ahead and please wait for us to try to bring you into the meeting. And you will be given an opportunity to speak. And all members of the public have up to 5 minutes for their testimony. And I do ask that you make any testimony you have directed towards me, not anyone else in the room, and try to keep it civil, of course. And then after that, there will be an opportunity for the applicant for up to 15 minutes for a rebuttal, address any questions or concerns that were brought up by staff or members of the public. So with that, I think we should just get to it. So it is 6:02 p.m. and I will open the public hearing for MSP 22-0002 Diagonal Estates, and Mr. Finkel will be presenting.
Good evening. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. As you just stated, this is a request for a major subdivision, Diagonal Estates. It consists of 5 parcels. The subject property is located on the north side of Kootenai County, just west of Diagonal Road. Before I get into the specifics of this request, I'd like to address some of the early on discussions and some of the nuances that we were faced with when the application was submitted. The subject property consists of 25 acres. Until recently, I would say probably within the last couple weeks, the county assessor's maps have not been updated to reflect the current map configuration of the parcels in the area. As I'm sure you have looked in the file, we had to complete a parcel overlay with a georeferencing in order to locate the specific area. This is due to the fact that the property owner owned multiple parcels in the area, and what they have done is they have completed several boundary line adjustments to shift the parcels directly to the south of the subject property. There's 3 5-acre parcels that are directly to the south of the subject property with a 25-acre piece, and then land that is also under the ownership of the applicant directly to the west. So that did early on lead to some confusion because we were trying to establish the metes and bounds of the subject property and determine whether there were any potential parcels created through any exemptions or illegal splits. We did run through all the county records and the surveys as well as the deeds, and we did determine that the current configuration that you see before you is accurate and it's compliant with the code. So the 3 parcels are the correct, or they are legitimate parcels of land. They're not considered to be additional density. They're just the density shifts from previous configuration of much larger parcels, if that makes sense. I can elaborate on that if you'd like. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because this proposal that consists of 5 acres is to the north and it's landlocked, but the access road, the main access, will be via a private road that will traverse along this common lot line between these parcels, and it will dead end within this plat. So the parent parcel is fairly flat. I mean, it's very there's almost no slope, if any. As you can see, it's denuded. There's no vegetation on the subject property. And the current zoning is rural with a minimum parcel size of 5 acres and a density of 1 dwelling per 5 acres. The comp plan designation is country, and the country designation does allow for subdivisions of this sort. This is the layout of the subdivisions. So it's the 5 parcels that are to the north of the 3 parcels that were boundary line adjusted. So the new private road will be constructed to the Associated Highway District standards, providing access to a total of 8 parcels, but only 5 of those are part of this plat. Each parcel will have an individual well as well as an individual septic system, and that's compliant with our code. As you can see, these are some of the photos that were provided by the applicant. As I said, it doesn't present any challenges for future development. It's fairly flat, and therefore we didn't really have any need for conceptual engineering, geotechnical analysis. The applicant did have to do a conceptual stormwater plan that will be further reviewed if this application is approved at the time of site disturbance for the physical construction of the road. We did solicit comments from agencies with jurisdiction. The applicant will have to comply with, your standard requirements for building permits with Kootenai County Building Division, right-of-way dedication, approach permits, cash in lieu of improvements, and setback requirements are part of the highway district requirements. Health Department will, of course, review septic permits, and Northern Lakes Fire Protection District had some requirements for street signage as well as addressing. During the public comment period, we received comments from one individual in support and one in opposition. I did receive a phone call from an individual that was asking for clarification of density of 1 per 5. I did return the call, but I believe I left a voice message, but I never heard back. So there was no further communication with that individual. Based on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation from the agencies with jurisdiction, staff recommends that staff's analysis is that the application is compatible with the surrounding residential development. The applicant must comply with the public agency requirements, and that the applicant must construct the shared infrastructure improvements. I stand for any questions that you have at this time.
Okay. I may wait for if the lot line adjustment becomes an issue. I don't want to take us into the weeds on something that's not exactly an issue before me for something that came before this application. So if that's an issue, I'll bring you back up to discuss that. But for now, thank you, and I think we'll get to the applicant in the public comment. Thank you, Mr. Finkel.
Good evening, Mr. Hearing Examiner. For the record, Steve Circle with Tri-State Consulting Engineers. My address, 1135 North Government Way, Hayden, Idaho. I'm here on behalf of Willamette Valley Real Properties, and we have we've gone through the process. I've reviewed the staff report, and I want to thank Vlad for dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's. I want to just add a couple more things. As you can see the plat there, and on this plat, of course, we have the recorded deeds for the amended or the boundary line adjustments. So that's already been vetted through. It was a pretty laborsome process to move those around, but as we did that, we've also met with the highway district, and to go in a little more detail of that, we will be developing that road, and it will be, to correct a little bit, the highway district has agreed to take on the road, so it will be a dedicated right-of-way instead of an easement, so it will be a public highway district road. Obviously, we got to design and meet to their standards and build it to their standards as well. And as you can see on the north side where there's a reservation for future right-of-way dedication there, and that involves the development to the north, which is Humbird Acres, I believe, which is another developer who have gone to the county or the highway district and done the same thing as far as keeping the roads private. They're going private, so that's why we're not pushing it through. they didn't want to provide and allow for future connectivity. But reserving that right of way does allow that in the future if, it seems to be that the HOA or, decades down the line when we're all gone, maybe there'll be something they want to do. We have also drilled all 8 wells, 5 to support the subdivision and the 3 boundary line adjusted lots. And as you see in the package, prior to drilling those wells, I prepared a hydrogeological evaluation of the area to support it for water, and that's obviously in your packet and it's supporting as well. Other than that, I have read through the staff report. I agree with the 3 analysis or the meeting those requirements. I don't think we'll have any problem with that. And I'd request for your recommendation when you see fit, if you will, for approval, and I stand for any questions you may have.
Okay, I have no questions for you at this time.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, just going from the top of the stack. I believe I have Laura. Score. I'm sorry, I can't read it.
I can help you with that. Lawrence Scarcello, I reside at North 22389 Kevin Road. I penciled myself as neutral, but it is contingent on one thing. How this came about, we traded this parcel down on Diagonal Road for a parcel that's closer to our home place off of Kevin Road. It was a straight across trade, no money changed hands. But it was contingent on whatever road they put in off of Diagonal running north. I would have an easement off one of those property lines into our field, which is directly west, if you will. Now, I'm pretty flexible as to where that easement would be. Could I approach the screen, or is that feasible?
Sure.
I don't know if I can run your laser or not. So I wouldn't care if an easement came off that street or that property line or that one. Now, we have no plans to develop said field. Our family goal is to not develop. But again, we traded the farthest corner of our place for a corner that was right next to where we winter cattle, manure, cow smells. We thought, well, this will head off a potential problem. So again, that's what prompted the trade. But part of that trade was an easement to jog over. So if I get my easement, I'm neutral, and if I don't get my easement, I'm a little different category. But any questions you may have of me, I'm happy. I wrote my cell phone number on that. I'll talk to you afterwards if you'd like. Please. Yeah.
Okay, that was part of like a contract, a written contract?
We do have that in some language, yes. I talked with Matt Afana quite a bit on this. He said it's not a problem. The only reason I'm here is to kind of wanted to do some follow-up on that.
Okay. And perhaps that may or may not, maybe should be reflected at this point, but before final plat possibly.
I'm a patient guy, but attention to detail is sometimes wise.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your comment.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, next I have Susan Aver. Good evening. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Susan Aver. I live at 3170 West Diagonal Road in Rathdrum, Idaho. I just have some general questions as an interested party living across the street from where this nightmare is going to go in. I am highly opposed to this. Is there any way we could put a picture like this up so that I can ask some questions about it?
Do you have a plat map as part of your slide deck? Possibly. Just a little more zoomed out. I think seeing some of the houses on the south side and north side.
It was the assessor's map that was sent out.
Well, I've seen that map and different versions of that map. There's lots of different ones that come in my packet, so I'm familiar with what you're talking about, and it's so you can direct all those comments to me.
So my question is based on this map, which is not what came in the mailer, why does the road have to go here?
Well, I'm not going to be answering specific questions about that. I appreciate thinking out loud, and I'll give opportunity for staff to comment on some of your questions, but I'm not in a position that I can
That's
answer.
one of my questions.
Okay.
My other question is, has any research been done on the impact to the elk migration path that goes directly through there that also roams through my property every year?
Are you directly across the street?
I am.
Okay. And they come through that.
Yes, they do,
Okay.
along with the deer and the turkeys. I was unable to find any sort of documentation in the files anywhere that anyone had taken that into consideration at all. My third question is has any research been done to current and future traffic impacts? I did put several public information requests in to get current traffic patterns and arrest records and citation records. Unfortunately, they did not arrive on time. But I was unable to find any of that information, the packets and documentations that I pulled offline as well. And I have lived on this road for 5 years, and it is a racetrack. And to see additional impacts like this, and then to read statements like this that say, you know, that talk nothing about even, it says, the transportation system will be safe, efficient, and minimize traffic congestion. How? I see nothing that proves that whatsoever, or that has even taken any of that into consideration. But yet, we watched a young girl flip 3 months ago. Boom. It's not safe. And to add to it is a nightmare. So I think somebody has some due diligence to do on several different facts that hasn't been done. And I would like to see that taken into consideration before you impact a whole lot of lives. Thank you.
I believe I have Nika Bick. May wish to speak. Okay, you're okay? You sure? Okay. All right. So, I'd like to have staff comment on a couple of those, but I think as a matter of order, I guess that doesn't matter. I guess I can give the applicant the opportunity to address some of those first. And maybe that'd be more appropriate. See if you can address some of those concerns ahead of time, and I may have some more questions for staff for some clarifications on some of those issues.
Absolutely. Again, for the record, Steve Circle. As Mr. Scarcello came and presented, I didn't know anything about that, but we'll certainly talk afterwards. My client, Matt Afana, who's with Willamette Valley Real Properties, hadn't shared that with me, but as he stated, I mean, we certainly have a final plat to go through, so we have no problem monitoring that, especially if it's in a written agreement. So that, I think we can check off as a checked item. So as part of Mrs. Aver's comments, so as you can see on the plat, the location of that road approach, I mean, realistically, Diagonal Road is a straight, long racetrack. She's right. I mean, it's a straight, long road. But we addressed that with the Highway District when we met with them and we talked about traffic. We're only generating 5 additional new lots. So it's really low impact. it is in compliance, as you see there, with the zoning and the density. So on a traffic standpoint, we can't control. It's obviously gonna, as she already testified, that traffic has become increasing. Well, that's everywhere, you know. But we, the location of where it's at, and we split it right down the middle, so then we can logically create those nice lots for the homes. And with the 5-acre lots, to address a little bit of the wildlife mitigation, you know, versus an unplatted, undeveloped farmland versus 5-acre lots, you know, you've got a modest home on there and you got quite a bit of room still on a 5-acre lot for that to work. I live in Cougar Gulch. I have an elk herd the Cougar Gulch herd that travels back and forth all the time. I have them on my property pretty much, well, quite a bit in the fall. And then that's not due to salt licks, by the way. It's a couple apple trees at the bottom. So, you know, wildlife, I know that Fish and Game was solicited for comment, and I don't believe there was any comment that came back from that. So, you know, I know that there was a discussion, you know, about traffic and whatnot with the highway district, and they've already received and accepted our preliminary plat, and the comment letters in the packet for you. So with that, I would answer any questions you may have that I haven't addressed here, but I think I might have addressed them all.
Indeed, and the highway, and just again, the highway district is they're gonna take control and
Yes, sir.
jurisdiction over the road.
That's correct. The approach, of course, will be, you know, designed per their standards along with the road, which is as safe. Now, I can tell you that Diagonal Road, I know it is slated for improvement for a signal at the intersection of 41, which is a few miles to the west, that's where they've got a lot of significant accidents and I think a few fatalities. So they've been working with the ITD to have that signalized. And so that'll be a bonus further that way. But, you know, short of, because the alignment of this road is so straight for so long, you know, really, as most highway districts, all they can do is sign it and then maybe put up some warning signs and stuff like that to remind the travelers that there's a speed and it needs to be enforced. So,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. And yeah, Mr. Finkel, you could just come expound perhaps a little bit on the requirements for traffic and wildlife.
Absolutely. I'd like to clarify something into the record. Based on the applicant's original request and in my staff report, it states that the road will be privately maintained. It will be constructed to the Associated Highway District, but privately maintained by the HOA. If that has changed, we will need, at the time of final subdivision approval request, Mr. Sokol will have to submit a letter from the Highway District stating that they're willing to take on the public road so that the dedication and conveyance on the face of plat will be accurately addressed. Because as it stands today with a private road that they're proposing, they will be obligated to have an HOA formed as well as CCNRs to maintain that road. So I want to be very clear that that is different. It's not an issue as long as the Highway District is amenable to that, but they would have to give their blessing in writing so that the owner certificate on the face of plat can be adequately addressing conveyance. And hopefully Mr. Circle understands that. The other comments that were submitted by the public, Mr. Scarsello did raise some questions or his position with respect to a need for an easement to his property. Just to be very clear, what Mr. Scarsello is requesting is not an obligation on as part of a subdivision process. What Mr. Scarsello is referring to is strictly a civil matter between the current owner of the subdivision and him. That needs to be handled outside of this platting process. It should have no legal bearing on this because it's not required per code. And if there was some obligation or some sort of commitment by both parties that they mutually agreed to, then that's fine. But that should have no legal basis on the subject request. So I want to be very clear that that should not be part of your consideration or a condition of approval. That's a civil matter. With respect to, I'm sorry, I can't recollect what the
Wildlife requirements in the code.
so the statements that were raised by one of the adjacent property owners, I acknowledge and I understand those concerns. Typically, we solicit comments from the the Idaho Department of Fish and Game for large, major subdivisions that are 10, 20, in case that's coming up next, it's over 100 lots. And so in that case, there is going to be a great impact based on the development layout as well as roads and so on. This application is only one parcel over the current threshold for a minor subdivision. It's very minimal impact, aside from the boundary line adjustments that took place, which we cannot take into consideration. So we did not solicit comments from from that agency. Moreover, the property is located adjacent to a mining site. So there's significant amount of disturbance that's already there with a mining pit. Having additional 5 acre lots, yes, it will have some impact, but it's not something that would be, from what I, have historically processed with other subdivisions, it's not going to be so detrimental that you're going to shift the, the current habitat or the current corridor of the wildlife out there. I'm not an expert, but we did not solicit comments because this is a very small project. We typically make a discretional call which projects get to review by, Fish and Game, Idaho Department of Lands, and so on. It was a discretional call. Perhaps it's an error on my part, but that's my explanation. With respect to traffic impacts, it's a very similar situation. It's a discretionary call at times by staff as well as the highway district. We do incentivize on more complex, more dense development to have the applicant prepare either a trip generation analysis or a full-blown traffic impact study. The difference between the two is that a trip generation analysis basically addresses AM and PM peak trips as well as average daily trips that would lead the agency that reviews the application to make a determination whether any improvements are necessary. A traffic impact study addresses the need for dedication of rights-of-ways, construction of acceleration lanes, deceleration lanes, turning lanes, and so on. In this case, being that it's a 5-lot subdivision, staff did not request it or even suggest it as part of the pre-application process, and the highway district did not require it either. If they had a concern with traffic, that would have been brought forward at the time of agency review, and we would have requested that the applicant submit that, and then any further review and obligations that were to be placed on the applicant would have been part of a condition of approval. So I want to be very clear on that. If you have any questions, I can further elaborate.
No, that was very thorough. Thank you. Mr. Callahan, did you have a comment?
Yes, sir, if I may. For the sake of the audience, we have no one on staff that's a traffic engineer. We rely on the highway districts for their expertise, and they are very good about telling us when they think there's an issue. And so in a case like this, since they did not say there was an issue, we assume it's okay to go forward. We don't substitute our knowledge for theirs. On matters of fish and game, you could, if you're of a mind, remand this back to us. We could refer this to Fish and Game, see what they say, and then bring it back to you for a final consideration. That's one option. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Circle, can you come up again and address the issue with the roads, whether that's going to be, because that did jog my memory that I saw it was going to be HOA maintained in the file. Can you comment on
Yeah.
maybe that's a new development?
When we met with the Board of Commissioners for Lakes Highway District, I can't recall the date, but it was a month and a half ago. And we deliberated back and forth with them on, they wanted it to be right away for the purposes for future connectivity in the future. So we agreed, okay, we'll turn it into right away instead of previously we were going to be privately owned and privately maintained. And then we debated back and forth on whether it's going to be maintained by them or us. And if we're gonna build to their standard and we got a dedicated right-of-way, then there really wasn't a big benefit. So then I'm surprised the new letter doesn't state that, but I can clarify that. Regardless, they have to sign on the final plat anyway. So whether we still maintain it or not, we're still gonna have an HOA, and CCNRs, to control the construction type of, in the development.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I guess I forgot to check if there were members of the public via Zoom.
Thank you. There are none. It's only staff that's on Zoom today.
All right. It's good to have everyone back in person. So, all right. With that, and there are no other members of the public here who wish to comment on this application. Now's your last chance, because I will be closing the public hearing at 6:31 p.m. for MSP 22-0002 Diagonal Estates. And as a quick reminder, I have 2 weeks to write my recommendation, and that will be scheduled before the county commissioners, who again will make the final decision for this application. All right, with that, I will move us, still 6:31 p.m. I will open the public hearing for MSP 22-0005 Lone Mountain Estates 8th through 11th editions. And again, Mr. Finkel, for the county.
Good evening, once again, for the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is a major subdivision request by JT Holdings LLC. The subject property is located northeast of the intersection of Cholco and Ramsey Roads. The subject property consists of several, I believe there's 6 or 7 parcels totaling 570 acres in size. The property is zoned rural, and the comp plan designation is country. The property is located northeast of the existing recently approved Lone Mountain Estates 6th and 7th edition. With respect to the current status of those previous plats, 6th edition was platted and has recently had the road constructed that terminates at this point with future access to the current request, and that's Eclipse Road. And then there's also another road called Ceylon that is within 7th edition, and that will be constructed through the final plat of this request. I believe that has since been approved as well. So those 2 existing public roads will be the primary access to the subdivision, as well as an emergency access through Brighart right-of-way, future right-of-way heading directly east. The current request consists of 4 phases, totaling 111 lots, with, as I previously stated, access via Eclipse and Ceylon roads through 6th and 7th edition of Lone Mountain Estates. Water will be provided by Lone Mountain Homeowners Association water system, and septic will be provided via individual septic systems. I'd like to briefly discuss the existing water system conditions. So the current water system that was approved, I believe, and I would like to have you request Mr. Curry to further elaborate on that if I am misstating something, or if I didn't fully disclose the current status of it. But Lone Mountain Estates water system was originally approved with the first phase, and it had, I believe, up to 168 connections that Mr. Curry advised me of. That has been all vetted through DEQ, IDWR for water rights, as well as PhD. This final request for 4 additional phases will be, from what I gather, will be over 11 connections of what was originally approved for the water system of 168 connections. Mr. Curry, myself, and Director Callahan discussed the possible avenue for making this move forward with a will serve letter, giving some specific sideboards that, A, everybody was under the understanding that they will grant a will serve letter contingent on having the water system have an additional water right granted, as well as having an additional well and a reservoir constructed to accommodate the new connections. We do have a letter from DEQ as well as IDWR and the engineer of record, that they're all on the same page, that they're working through that process of expanding an existing water system. But there is the willingness and the desire to serve those parcels with the expansion of that water system. Now, the question may be, do they have the capacity today? Based on what has been provided by the engineer and explained to staff as well as DEQ, the property is over the aquifer. So there's clearly sufficient water supply groundwater supply that's there, but will be accommodated with the construction of, the new well as well as the reservoir. So we do have a condition of approval as part of this request that prior to final plat recordation, those items need to be, addressed by all agencies involved. And if it's not constructed prior to plat recordation, that they submit a bond based on the engineer's estimate of 150% of improvements to basically be a leverage for the county to make sure that the applicant constructs the water system. So we believe, in our view, that we do have some interpretational call or some discretion to consider what the applicant is proposing as being sufficient. These are some of the photos of the site. As you can see, this is Cholca Road heading to Ramsey Road. These are some of the photos of the existing power easement. And this is, I believe, Ramsey Road, as well as some of the photo shots along the property line on the adjacent right-of-way. Just to go back to this plat, the question would be raised is, did the applicant submit a traffic impact study? They did. That has been reviewed and approved by the Highway District, and they do have numerous conditions of approval for mitigation purposes. That's also part of this proposal. So just to give you an explanation or do cross-reference for when certain things are required, it's the more intense requests that will generate significant amount of impact require traffic impact analysis. The same goes for Fish and Game Review, which they did review and provided comments, including some wildlife-friendly language to be included as part of the CCNRs, just to make that reference to the previous application. We did solicit comments from various agencies that are before you. Their comments are very standard. I did elaborate on most of them. I don't know if there's anything else I can add. The roads will obviously have to be constructed or bonded for before they're dedicated to the Highway District. Same goes for the Water District. So that's really a fairly straightforward process in terms of agency review. One of the agencies that is not listed on the screen is Lakeland School District. We did solicit comments from them. Unfortunately, myself and my supervisor, Ben Tarbutton, looked at some most recent applications that were submitted for major subdivisions, at least 3 more. And the agency, the school district, has not provided any comments on the most recent applications. I don't know why, but they are definitely listed as part of the agency review on our online portal. I don't have a comment for you. As you know, we currently don't have any mechanism to require any financial obligation in that regard either. One more comment, we did receive 4 comments in support and 3 comments in opposition of this request I don't believe there was any explanation as to why. We do have the same analysis as for the previous request, that the proposal is compatible with the surrounding residential development, given that this is 8th through 11th phase of a similar development to the south as well as to the west. The public agencies have reviewed the application, and the applicant must comply with their requirements, and that the applicant must construct the infrastructure improvements necessary to serve this request. One more item that just came to mind that I wanted to briefly address, but I want Mr. Curry, applicant's representative, to go into greater detail. This was just recently discussed. I initially brought this forward to the applicant, and this was recently brought up by Mr. Tarbutton, is that the applicant is requesting, or they're proposing to have Wadi and, I can't remember the other road, but the two internal road spurs to dead end with a cul-de-sac and then have an emergency fire access road between them. I asked Mr. Curry why they have such an interesting or such a peculiar design, and they said, well, it's marketing is for privacy and so on. What I advise Mr. Curry on is that as long as the highway district has no concerns, we're not going to be opposed to it, because technically, if they're taking over the roads, there's sufficient turnaround for fire apparatus. It's a non-issue. But there is a section under Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, section 86707C, that states connectivity. Roads, trails, and sidewalks in subdivisions shall be designed to complement and enhance existing transportation systems so as to create an integrated network that allows for the safe and efficient movement of people within the subdivision, to adjacent subdivisions, and to nearby commercial areas, schools, places of worship, and other community facilities. Roads shall be designed with as many connections as possible and relatively direct routes in and out of the subdivision without running traffic through previously established neighborhoods. So I think this section of the code clearly addresses having connectivity to adjoining parcels of land for future connection, but it also alludes to having great connectivity within the subdivision itself. I am not an expert on traffic engineering or traffic flows. So we would have to, as Director Callahan had stated in the past, in the other request, we have to rely on the agency with jurisdiction. I cannot say that this is a flawed design or it presents a problem. It's interesting, but I don't know if there's anything that we could request in terms of redesign or condition because the highway district didn't bring it up. So I'd like to have Mr. Curry, perhaps if you are interested in hearing that explanation, further elaborate on that. I don't have any additional information to add.
Indeed. Well, I'd probably have a couple questions for you, and maybe just to have you expand a little. So you cut me off at the pass with the water and the roads and the school district. So, yeah, and I was, I guess I was reading through the file, and I guess I don't want to think out loud up here too much. But it's your opinion, staff's opinion, that the letter, the intent to serve from the homeowners association satisfies the code requirements for a will serve letter?
Well, it's a will serve letter. So the association being, the applicant is the one that created the water association. They do have the willingness and desire, and they have the vested interest in serving this plat. In terms of the system being improved to have the capacity, because it's over the aquifer, and we don't have any information from IDWR to say that there could be a potential for a competing junior or senior water rights issue. We believe that it's a matter of timing before DEQ approves this this expansion. But we do have a condition of approval, 7.17 for the record, that states at the time of final subdivision approval of each phase. So if they decide to do an incremental improvement or expansion of the water system, we will have checkpoints at each phase that says At the time of final subdivision approval of each phase, the applicant shall demonstrate that the proposed improvements associated with the upgrades to the water system operated by Lone Mountain Homeowners Association, including a well and reservoir, have been approved by by the Idaho Department of Water Resources and Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. That condition clearly puts the brakes on their ability to final plat unless that has been satisfied. So, in essence, if the department used too much discretion to consider the conditional will serve letter as potentially problematic, the condition of approval that must be met prior to final plat addresses it. So we will not have a deficient water source with each phase, or at least phase 8, and moving on. Hope that helps.
Okay, yes, it did. And then just real quick, because I guess another thing I noticed, and so you already sort of talked about it, was I guess one entrance exit from the subdivision. I'm of course open for the applicant will expound on this a little bit. And thank you for taking me some of the code that's relevant.
There's two currently.
Oh, the second.
So we have the first one in phase 6, and it has a separate entrance onto Chilco Road. And then you have Ceylon in phase 7 that's also entering onto Chilco Road. So let me go back to, I wish I had, perhaps staff can show you, I'm sorry, I'll clarify that.
And if I missed that, I apologize. So.
Sorry, I should have expanded to elaborate, but there are 2 access points.
And again, I understand that the highways district is the one kind of,
Well, they wouldn't allow
driving the
a
ship here, so.
subdivision to go forward that had more than 25 lots with only 1 access point, but there are 2. And then there's a third emergency access through Bright Heart, a right-of-way that's to be dedicated to parcels directly to the east.
Okay.
Ben's hunting for the map, please.
All right. Well, let me see if I have any other questions for you while he's looking. Oh, yeah. Was there any thought or consideration, discussion given to dedication of open space, creation of trails, anything like that with the subdivision? And or is there anything in the code that may not require, but push in that direction, perhaps?
The code does state that we encourage conservation design subdivisions, but there's nothing to say that with certain acreage or a certain number of lots, you're obligated to do that. If they were to do a conservation design subdivision, they would be obligated to have a conservation group, a conservancy group that would take on the conservation easement. And as I understand currently, it's been problematic for other applicants that have brought those types of application forward. They could have created an open space that would have been just part of the HOA, but they didn't. It seems like their product that they're proposing is similar to all the other phases that they have previously done. So it's a good question, but that really hasn't been discussed or proposed to the applicant through the review process.
Okay.
And Mr. Hearing Examiner, to be more direct, there's nothing in the code for this sort of subdivision that requires any sort of open space. If they were doing a conservation easement, it is a requirement, a conservation subdivision, I mean. But just a straightforward major subdivision has no open space. And I'd be the first one to say, it's problematic to me, but so is the school district issues. And part of the issue, you have to lay at the feet of our legislature on the state capitol, frankly. Because there's no statutes that allow us to do those kinds of things.
I appreciate your comment. Well, if perhaps you can keep looking, and that's, I don't want to get us too hung up on something that I might have missed. So I apologize for that. So
We do have the map, but unfortunately we can't project it. There's some sort of a,
Because I can project the PowerPoint presentation, I can't project another screen view onto the,
You can't do a screen share?
oh,
well, the screen share is working for Zoom.
Maybe I need to get out of the PowerPoint, or you need.
You're projecting, right? Yeah, I should be projecting.
So, it's not PowerPoint, it's just a picture.
Yeah, just
Take it out of the presentation code in PowerPoint. On
Yeah.
Zoom.
Right. Yeah, that should work.
Now switch to picture. Drag it up. So missing the screen is.
There you go.
okay, so as you can see, we have Eclipse that's heading north and then northeast to the property. And then we also have Ceylon in this location. So there are two access points that both enter onto Cholco Road. And they go, as you saw on the face of plat, they kind of loop around. And then there's going to be an emergency access on the east side of the property. So there's actually going to be two primary access points with an emergency access point at such time that there's development to the east with road construction.
all right. So both the primary accesses are down there off of
Cholco.
Chilco, or yeah, however you pronounce that. And then okay, all right. I'll have to go ahead and re-review that in the file again. So I apologize for getting us caught up on that. But I guess I wanted to make sure that that was true. So, all right. That's enough for you for now. Thank you very much, Mr. Finkel, and I'll bring the applicant.
Sorry, that's a good question.
All right, applicant and/or their representative.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, Mike Curry, reside at 1378 West Moselle, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 83815. I've got a list of things to discuss, kind of some points of clarification, but before I get too far, I'd like to address the question and the comments that were just raised. I'm afraid that we'd get too far down a rabbit hole and wouldn't be able to come back out. So when this project was originally, let me back up for a second. We've developed phases 1 through 5 north of Diagonal, consisting of in excess of 105 lots, with the cooperation of a water system that we developed through our own Lone Mountain Homeowners Association. It's no longer our water system technically, because it's now a public drinking water system and licensed through the state of Idaho. With regards to the access and traffic with this particular project, before we developed any lots that were adjacent to Chilco and or phases, let's call it Lone Mountain Estates 6 and 7, we met multiple times with Lakes Highway District and with the commissioners. One point of clarification is when you address the number of lots and the primary access, the question comes up, what subdivisions are we talking about, and what subdivisions occurred and were platted when the number of lots exceeded what the code requires, which is, I think, 25 lots, 25 or 27, 25, I believe. So Lone Mountain's 6 and 7, both of which are platted. It's interesting that we don't have Lone Mountain 7 on the map yet, but that has taken a little bit of time at this point. Lone Mountain 7 and 6, the total combined lots there is 41. So we've already exceeded the number of lots that would be required, that would require 2 points of ingress and egress. So when we met with the highway district, we actually had, do you have the map, Ben or Vlad, that shows all of our parcels? Does this require that I push a button here?
The green light means you're on.
Okay, okay. All right, thanks, Dave. The red button in the middle? Okay, perfect. So when we met with the highway district, Lone Mountain 6 is here, Lone Mountain 7 is here, both of which are platted. When we met with the highway district, our proposal was to have this connectivity and this road end in the cul-de-sac, this road end in the cul-de-sac. There was going to be no loop. The highway district, and I'll preface this by saying that we've over the last several years, we've learned that doing our due diligence long before we have an application for the county has paid off immensely. We work with staff, we work with all the agencies, and we come up with these plans after all of that has been done. So typically when we get to this point, we've addressed all of issues that would have been raised by staff and or all of the agencies. So it tends to be that when we get to this stage, we have already addressed 90% of those comments and or have agreed to them. So when we met with the highway district and they saw the proposal for the cul-de-sac here and the cul-de-sac here and no connectivity here, the question came up about the number of lots and the number of points of ingress and egress. So all of these phases, okay, if you have the boundary here, have this point and this point as ingress and egress. Does that make sense? Okay, so you have 2 points of ingress and egress for Lone Mountains 8 through 11. Is that a technicality? You know, again, like David said, I'm not a traffic engineer. What I learned through our collaboration with the highway district was loop this project, connect one of these roads to Chilco. Traffic study requires that we improve Chilco in both directions, including a turn lane, both a right-hand turn lane and a left-hand turn lane, and an acceleration lane for the connection to Chilco. So again, the point of clarification is that Eclipse technically is the only primary ingress and egress for the 600 acres. However, if you look at the phases of the project, if you look at them individually, the phases have, and I'll get to the point for emergency ingress and egress between the cul-de-sacs here and what Vlad referred to as a possibly an uncommon or an odd looking arrangement. We'll discuss that here in a bit. And then there was discussion about Bright Heart Lane. So all of the issues that we're addressing here with traffic, both the connection to Chilco, the turn lanes that will be required. This Ceylon actually, as Vlad stated, does connect to Chilco.
Okay.
But it's an emergency ingress and egress. So if there is ever an event, and obviously we've worked with the fire departments, and it required collaboration with 2 different fire departments in this case, because Timberlake is has part jurisdiction and Northern Lakes has the other part jurisdiction. Their only comments were that while Ceylon is not a public ingress and egress, it is a private, maintained by the HOA, Knox box locked and gated on both ends for emergency ingress and egress to Ceylon. So if in the event of an event, let's call it, we have several ways out of the project. Okay, one of them would be the initial primary access to Chilco. Secondly would be the secondary emergency ingress and egress. Thirdly, we have an easement that's here that hasn't even been discussed today, that we actually have worked with Bonneville Power to provide this easement from here. Vlad, you didn't know about this yet because I just locked this down with Bonneville Power. This easement here is for this lot. This lot essentially is encumbered by the easement with Bonneville Power and Avista. The corner here is where the home would be located. From here to here is a private easement for that lot. Well, we discussed with Bonneville Power about the possibility of access to Powerline Road. Powerline Road runs the entire length of the easement all the way back out to Chilco. So Bonneville Power agreed that if they have access through here, then we have access through there for emergency ingress and egress. So we have Chilco through Eclipse, we have Chilco emergency ingress and egress for Ceylon, and then we have this access that when we plat the 8th edition will actually connect to the Powerline easement and to Powerline Road, which is built to a fire standard and it runs the entire length of the easement. And then we have Brightheart. So Brightheart came up through comments with the Highway District. It exists here. Brightheart Lane from this property line over to North Estates? I can't remember the name of the road that runs north-south here and that actually runs back out to Chilco. Anyway, that road is public right-of-way. Brightheart is not. Brightheart is private property. I don't even believe that there is an easement on this private property for Brightheart. The requirement from the Highway District is not for, or from the fire department, is not for emergency ingress and egress. The requirement is for right-of-way. And we're dedicating the right-of-way to the property line for future connectivity through the plat. I will say this, typically these right-of-ways and these emergency ingress and egresses occur through development. It isn't until the development happens that they actually occur. You don't see the fire department or the highway districts going out and trying to procure access through private properties for emergency ingress and egress. So through the development, we will be providing easement to our property line to the extent that we can provide easement for emergency ingress and egress. It's not limited to emergency ingress and egress. If somebody decided to develop the property on the other side of the property line over here, the highway district would require at that point that they dedicate right-of-way, right? So then you would have right-of-way here, you'd have right-of-way here connecting to existing right-of-way, and then you'd have a requirement that those roads be built to highway district standards, which would then provide for an additional ingress and egress, not just emergency ingress and egress. Now, I've rambled on a lot to cover those couple issues, but I still have a few more items to cover. Are we all good?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Any questions before I move on?
No, that was very thorough. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
all right. Vlad?
Please continue.
Did I broadside you at all? Am I in trouble? Sledgehammer?
I only have one comment.
Okay.
Hearing examiner, I don't know, you may want to ask the applicant if the new information brought forward with regard to access to the power line road necessitates any sort of condition of approval on within the staff report to be addressed and mitigated at the time of final plat review.
I can answer that.
Please
So
do.
we actually have an email from the representative at Bonneville Power that she requested it. It didn't come from us. She requested that they have access via this private, oops, did I do that? Yeah, I did. So she requested that they have access through here to Powerline Road, and I reciprocated with absolutely, as long as we can have it also, because it'd be a nice place to have additional ingress and egress for emergency purposes. So we will be, it's easy when you plat to dedicate easements to whomever is going to benefit from the easement. So that one will be dedicated to essentially through the homeowners association for public emergency ingress and egress, and it will remain that way in perpetuity. Will be described that way.
I recommend that, based on the testimony submitted by the applicant, that you request that they either include the dedication of a right-of-way within the CCNRs or on the face of plat prior to final plat recordation.
Understood.
Any thoughts on that?
No, understood.
All right.
Yep. Let's see here. I'll run through traffic real quick. I will say this, our traffic study that we completed for this project encompassed a conceptual view, which I don't have for you tonight, but it essentially was this. Not in its current form as you see it, because there's been many reiterations over the last several years, but in 2018, we requested a traffic study be completed by Welch Comer and Associates. Welch Comer and Associates completed the traffic study in 2018, hence where we came up with the collaboration with the Highway District as what the requirements would be if we had this number of lots. 163, I believe, is what the number Vlad had. We're at 181 now. So we recently updated the traffic study, and I'm sure Vlad's going to request that we update that also and get that and get on the record prior to final plat. And we also have that. That has actually been turned over to the Highway District within the last 10 days. So the Highway District has an updated traffic study that updates the one from 2018 for a couple different reasons. One was the additional density of 15 lots or so, but the other reason was it's been 5 years. So we thought it necessary that we update the traffic study. So did so.
Were there significant
No changes.
changes?
None.
Okay.
The mitigation on Chilco that was required for the connection to Chilco covered, in the new traffic study, it was determined that there were no additional warrants, which technically, we've heard that word before, it means what you're proposing meets all the requirements for the additional density. So,
Mr. Hearing Examiner, I don't necessarily think that it's necessary to require an additional condition of approval with regard to a new traffic impact study. I think typically when a final subdivision application is submitted, we receive supporting documentation from the agency with jurisdiction, in this case being Lakes Highway District, to state that the applicant has complied with their requirements and either posted a bond or completed road improvements. And that, in my view, would imply that any mitigation necessary based on the latest traffic impact study has been addressed. So I think it's fair to say that the existing condition in the order of decision encompasses any discussion or any mitigation that the applicant is addressing through the traffic impact study.
That's absolutely correct. And now that he brings it up, Lakes Highway District has a staff engineer. So the staff engineer at the time that this plat was brought forward would have addressed that issue. We addressed the issue just because of the additional density and wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any additional warrants. So he didn't request it, we did.
All right. And you have,
That's absolutely correct.
have you entered the agreement with the Highway District yet? Or
Well, the conditions
still
that you
just
have in your
condition?
packet are this plat is what they base their conditions on, and they didn't ask for a updated traffic study. They had the original traffic study. They looked at it and said, that looks good to us. We don't see where there would be any additional warrants. They're obviously the traffic guys, right? So they looked at it and said there would be no additional warrants. We took it one step further and updated it, just to make sure that it didn't become an issue. Nobody brought it up later on. And then tabled our project and had us appear back in front of the hearing examiner. So.
As unpleasant as that can be.
Yeah. Okay,
Please
I'm gonna
continue.
try to breeze through this real quick. Whoops. With regards to water, I did want to briefly touch on the issue with regards to DEQ. And just a point of clarification there is DEQ is technically not the jurisdiction that tells you whether or not you can or cannot have a water system. That's the health district. DEQ reviews the construction drawings for the health districts. So hence, when you see the conditional letters from DEQ, they tend to state that water system services must meet IDAPA standards. And so that requires that we provide them with all of the documentation that hence gets you from A to Z as far as the construction of that particular water system. So not only have we gone basically 75% to that point with Lone Mountain Homeowners Association, the next step would be to actually generate construction drawings for the additional distribution system and the reservoir and the additional well, all of which has been provided to DEQ in the form of a facility plan. So the engineer of record has already submitted to DEQ a facility plan that describes the water system components. The next step is a professional engineering report, which is into DEQ and under review currently. Third step is construction drawings for all of the facilities. And then so prior to final plat, we'll have to have the construction drawings reviewed, approved, and either bonded for or constructed. So we're well into that. And to be honest with you, Lone Mountain Homeowners Association has already constructed a considerable amount of the distribution system that was responsible for getting water to this subdivision. They actually have a water main that runs up the power line road easement that connects to 17, 16, 20 acre parcels to the east of us, and that we also procured the property from that has the elevation for the reservoir location. So we purchased that property from a property owner that was owned one of the 20 acre parcels there. And the distribution system that's gonna connect to the reservoir, 80% already there. Already approved by DEQ, already there. Just need to make the connection to a to-be constructed reservoir, drill the well, and then put in the distribution system for the proposed lots. So it's well underway. And also for point of clarification, the reservoir is not required. The reservoir is a requirement of meeting fire flow. Now, we don't have to meet fire flow, but it is something that, and I bring this up because we were going to discuss the cul-de-sacs and why we didn't connect them. It's a marketing thing. So the idea of having water that can also provide fire flows has become a comment that's made to us considerably. You know, we've sold, you know, in excess of 400 parcels out here on the prairie that are very similar to this. And we have many water systems, both private and public, that we've developed over the last 8 years. And in all cases, we get that question a lot. So in this case, we were able to buy the property and propose the location of the reservoir that would allow us to meet fire flow. The other issue is that the state of Idaho is now requesting that as many small water systems as possible connect to other water systems. They don't want a bunch of small water systems. So Kootenai, North Kootenai Water has approached us and says, we'd like to take over your water association to the north. We'd like to connect that possibly to this water system to the south, and we'd like to have a reservoir up on the mountain. That's how we ended up with the parcel and how we ended up with the design moving forward for the reservoir. So possibly within the next, I would say 10 years or so, you're going to see an existing substantial sized water system take over this water system and add it to theirs, more than likely. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to discuss was, you know, there's been a lot said about the number of lots, and we discussed this, Vlad and I did many times as we were proposing this project a couple of years ago. And the reason why we're here today with the number of lots that you see is essentially just streamlining the approval process. It has nothing to do with developing 111 lots next year, which sometimes you'll tend to see the applicants bring you projects that are going to be under construction. We're clearly going to be phasing this project. The sheer cost of infrastructure for this project is exorbitant. And so we mitigate that ourselves by phasing. And so the project, 111 lots, will be phased over the 4, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And we estimate somewhere between 1.5 to 2 years for each phase. So you're talking about the total number of lots being developed by the year 2030, so not next year. You know, people tend to, I wanted to answer your question about open space and yours also. We have lots of open space here. They're 5-acre parcels, and our average footprint of a home is about 2,300 square feet, and plus most people are building a 3,000 square foot shop. And if you do the math on the 217,000 square feet for each lot and 3,000 square feet of actual footprint, and then of course there's several acres of right of way, obviously, and road that's built there. But you know, the type of project that we built, the type of project that's been successful for us is this type of a project, and it's one of the reasons why we have to address that issue with the Fish and Game. And we do place their conditions in our CC&Rs and have been doing so for several years. So everybody that purchases a home from us is well aware of what they should or should not do with regards to critters and access as far as for the subdivision. That's all I have for now. I've got lots more on here, but I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I'll stand for any questions.
Well, make sure you're sure there's no anything else you want to address specifically. I'll review if I have any questions right now. I'm sure you'll have a chance for rebuttal after we have public comment.
Okay.
See if there's anything else specifically to be addressed there. Just real quick before I let you sit down, make sure there's nothing else I wanted to get from your main testimony. I think we hit all the main issues, so I'll let you go for right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. For public comment, we have Nika Bick. Would you like to speak? All right, please come up to the microphone. Tell us your name and address. And you have 5 minutes.
I've never done this before, so my name is Nika Bick. I live at 4432 West Seasons Road, Rathdrum, Idaho, 83858. I guess I don't have any, questions in particular with, statistics or anything, laws and all of that. I guess I just wanted to express as somebody that lives, in Rathdrum, and I have just had my first baby. And he's going to be going to school in Rathdrum, and I get my groceries at the, Super One there. As someone that lives there, and I noticed that people that have spoke live not in Rathdrum or Athol, the places that this is going to affect. And my neighbors, how is this going to affect our schools and our grocery stores? And, we drive down the road and we have lots of open space right now, but we're building on that open space. And I know, my husband is in construction, so I totally understand. But I just wanted to share, how is that going to affect the people that live here and raise their kids here and, those more of a sentimental, emotional thing. So, anyways.
That is allowed here, and congratulations. Yeah, and well, I don't want to speak too much out of turn, but hopefully we're trying to encompass as many of those concerns as we can in this process.
Yeah.
And that includes people like you coming to bring your perspective and make sure that we're considering all of that.
Well, and
So,
I know he said by 2030 and everything. And like I said, my husband he's a contractor. I grew up on a big farm, a big ranch, and I understand that, things are changing and homes are being built. But I just wanted to say, how does this affect the people that live there and we're left behind and we drive by and people move here for a certain reason and we see that and, I just wanted to voice that as well.
thank you. And Terry Green wishes to speak.
Actually, I'm sorry, what's your name? Mike, and what do you do? You work for?
The developer, JT Holdings
Okay.
Incorporated.
Oh, yeah, hi. Okay. You answered some really good questions that I had coming up, and so, because at the beginning of the thing, I got a little scared, and now I feel better about that emergency easement. I live on, I'm Terry Green.
That's okay, yeah, name and address for the record.
Terry Green, and I'm 20906 North Sembra Road.
Okay,
And so we were part of that initial, we were actually part of the subdivision, but they had to give part of a different name because of the water, I believe, or something. But so I had a couple questions, and one is right behind our house is where I think Ceylon, they're saying, is going down. And I guess I was worried that maybe it wasn't going to be an emergency. We were told it was going to be an emergency fire access. It's like 60 feet wide or something. And so then when they were talking about the roads, I started thinking they were going to put Ceylon all the way through as a road down there. But so I would be interested, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, to know, is Ceylon then going to turn, and is that in fact going to continue to be a emergency fire road behind us? And one of the reasons I ask is, I think before they could complete our subdivision, they had to take all the trees down there to have it open. And the problem we've had is we have weeds that are like 4 feet high. And if any of you have driven down Chilco, you'll notice that there's some people out there on Sembra that we all have been weed whacking the whole road, and you'll see all the menahunis, the rock gardens all over. And we've been doing everything we can, and my husband has gone down with a manual weed eater to try to get our 10-foot easement of weeds away. And somebody, I don't know if it should be the fire who's in charge of that, if that's the fire department or if it's the developer, I don't know, but someone should be tearing those weeds down. And my main reason for coming is, and they don't have like the chain across, so we have a lot of like quads and motorcycles that are going through those tall weeds with their hot mufflers and everything, and so we get worried about this. And this is the real reason I came is, everyone on our court has contacted Big Sky Development on more than one occasion each. And in fact, my neighbor, Lieutenant Colonel Norquist, has actually written them a letter as well. We have no fire hydrants on our court, but they have some on Wingspan, the next court next to us that also has 4 homes. We have 4 homes, and they have one on Eclipse already. But if you go down to the end of that fire easement, there are 7, there had been like 13, but there's 7 brand new huge fire hydrants down there, which are completely covered with 2.5 years worth of growth of vegetation and everything, because they just haven't been installed. And so we would like that, because during these summers we have weeds, we have no fire protection unless we have a tanker come, a truck, and how much water they hold, I don't know. But there are 4 nice residences there. And so we really were mostly hoping we could get a conditional that we would have those fire hydrants put on before they approved any map. And I don't know if that's part of the process, if that's allowed, but it's a safety issue. And, we're trying to do everything we can. So the water line easements behind our home, we've been keeping very, clear as well, and trying to take out all the deadwood. But we need a little assistance just trying to get those 2 little fire hydrants in. Anyway, that's the only reason I'm here.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hopefully, the applicant can address some of those concerns. Hopefully, you can speak to that real quick. At least with that easement, that's Salon, that emergency easement. Okay, anyway, thank you very much. So if I could get you to come back up and just speak real quick about that easement, who's going to be able to use it, who's in charge of it, is that an HOA run?
Yeah, so it is HOA. It'd be HOA maintained. So the easement itself is provided to the public, and for emergency ingress and egress. Like I said, it would be gated and chained and locked with specific locks. Hopefully that would address the issue that they have with regards to access through there. But both that issue and the issue with regards to the water and the hydrant. I can speak to the hydrant specifically, in that the reason why the hydrant was not installed in their subdivision is because it wouldn't meet fire flow requirements. So there was no reason to have a fire hydrant there. I mean, there is some hydrants installed to the west of them. I believe that your subdivision is east, and the other subdivision is west, correct? Yeah, so there were some hydrants that were installed along that line for purposes of air vac and air release, so that you have specific high points that occur in water mains, and they have to be able to vent them at some point in time. So a hydrant is a simple way of providing an air release option for the water main. I would say that, if they're interested in a hydrant I think they have their own homeowners association, because I think they're part of the Wilderness Ranch homeowners association, and I believe there's 2 of those. And I believe if they would, if they're interested in a hydrant for fire flows, that could and probably would happen at their request, maybe at some cost to them. I'm not sure, I can't speak to that, but at such time that the reservoir was installed, and then fire flows would actually be available. The reason why there's not a hydrant installed currently in their subdivision, again, is like I said, there's just, the flows wouldn't mandate it. Had the flows been there, had the subdivision had lots less than the 4.5 minimum requirement, 5 acre gross, there would have been hydrants installed, because it would have been required and mandated by the fire district. But those subdivisions were developed under different set of circumstances and didn't require the hydrant. I think that was the 2 issues.
I think so.
Access for.
Yeah,
sale.
and then.
Oh, with regards to the weed thing, again, HOA. This project is in its infancy stages, let's just say. 6th is just essentially paved a couple of weeks ago. 7th is the road's not even constructed yet. It's cleared, and there is some work being done on the roads. I don't foresee that happening or being finished until spring of next year. And then at that point, that fire access road would be constructed, and then it would be cleared of all the weeds and structures there. But ongoing after that point, it would be up to the HOA to maintain it properly. And if it's adjacent to their parcel, then that can be a discussion that their HOA has with the Lone Mountain Homeowners Association.
Okay. And then just real quick, did you have any communications with the school district?
Attempted to.
Attempted to?
So Vlad reached out in the form of a request for comments, and I called the president of the school district and received no call back.
Okay. Thank you. And I, again, forgot to check Zoom, but hopefully there's not anyone there who's been waiting to give their public comment.
It's all stuff.
All right, I was going to say they're a very patient person, if they were. All right, I'll just double check my notes real quick to make sure we have enough of a record that I can make my recommendation. All right, we hit everything that I wanted to have addressed and all the questions I had. So with that, unless there's any other comments from staff, or you have one final comment?
Say one thing.
All right.
With regards to the other party that was here with issues about how she feels. I agree. I've been here 20 years, moved across the state line into Coeur d'Alene in 1985, a resident, local. I've watched it all occur. I feel like I'm doing the very, very best that I can do with regards to mitigating everything that we propose, and, we call it not forcing 10 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag. We try to do what fits the neighborhoods, and if she didn't have somebody like me who cared, and the developer that I work for, he's an avid fisherman, hunter, and cares about what the end result is. And I think if you were to drive through some of our other neighborhoods, and I'd ask you that if you want to see what our product is, boy, get out there and drive a couple of them, and you'll see that what we provide is pretty unique. So.
All right, thank you very much. All right, with that, final call. Staff members good? All right, 7:29, I'll close the public hearing for MSP 22-0005, Lone Mountain Estates, 8th through 11th editions. And everyone have a good night.